Good morning. Happy Monday. That's it. That's our entire show.
Bye, guys.
I just wanted to do that. Bye. Stay here. We need your watch time and your love. This is Danielle Radford.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Roth Cornet.
Good morning.
There's these guys over here.
Hi, guys.
Oh, that's Joe.
Hey.
Ed.
Hello.
I didn't realize I middle school danced us when I
Yeah.
when
Well,
I
yeah. It's
when I sat down.
that's a couple
Yeah,
times.
boys and
I
girls.
did.
Boys and
It's been
girls.
Boys v.
I want
girls.
Danielle next to me all the time, so I appreciate it. And Ed, I'm in a sandwich of brilliance at this table this morning, and it's a good thing because we have very serious things to discuss. We're going to talk about Hollywood. We're going to solve it right here today on SJU within the next, I'd say,
God.
what do we get for one segment? About 20 minutes? Strap in. We're solving Hollywood in 20 minutes, counting down from now. There is an article in the New York Times about the future of Hollywood, which is a discussion that happens literally all the time.
Man, we love talking about us.
What's going on in Hollywood, guys? There's like starvation, the planet's dying, there's plastic in the ocean, but if we could just figure out streaming, man.
We just put some movie theaters on that big Texas-sized thing of plastic.
We're the real heroes.
Do a fire fest on the trash.
You know what you should do is just make a quirky animated film about Trash Mountain and then leave it at that. You've done your work.
That's it.
Good morning.
Roth is on one today. Good morning.
I'm just strapped in.
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, so let's talk about this. The New York Times spoke to filmmakers about the future of movies, streaming, and all the things. And first, we'll talk about the effects of streaming because that's obviously the biggest disruptor that's happening. And it's really funny because it's not a disruptor; it's
The
a fact.
scooter of-
Yeah. You guys know this term disruptor, right? In an industry.
Yeah.
You have to explain to the people.
It's like how MP3s were a disruptor.
Yeah.
Things like that. Like anything that comes along and like radically changes everything like overnight.
Right.
It's the name of the Gestalt robot that the Disrupticons form.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, as Joe said. And the disruptor of all disruptors is right there. Is Netflix.
Yeah,
It's
movie
Netflix.
theaters, inferior,
Yeah.
streaming, superior.
Netflix is the one that started it all and broke Blockbuster, broke the idea of home video, and changed the way, really did change the way that we view movies and television, period, in terms of also binge watching for TV. And our minds have changed since then in terms of how we view content, which is a word we'll be talking about.
Threw up in my mouth.
But now, of course, we've got Disney Plus coming, Warner Brothers. All of this has changed. Apple is coming. We talk about this a lot in terms of what it means for movies and for the theatrical experience now and in the future. Frankly, there was a banner year for movies and the box office last year. It's largely or in part because they cost more money. But we'll get into that as well. Here's what J.J. Abrams had to say. For a long time, people have been saying the business is changing, but that's an undeniable now. It's on.
I'm sure he said it just like that, too.
He did. Yeah.
And then Danger Zone cranked in.
Yeah.
It's out.
I think the first thing that we should talk about is I think there's an immediate sort of resistance, right, from the old guard, people that were making films in the 70s, which that's just not done that way, period, anymore. And people that really, really, really do love, as we all do, the theatrical experience. And I think there's counterpoints to make there. Let's start them. Joe Starr, tell me about your hurt feelings because you were pretty sad by this, made sad by a lot in this article.
Just some of the quotes are so interesting and so sort of like melancholy. Even the people who were like, times are changing and that's fine, they're still a little like, we shall never see the like of Rivendell. You know, like it's like, yeah, like the Industrial Revolution's coming and we're gonna invent some engines, but man, it'd be cool to meet Elrond. Wouldn't that be fun? Yeah, I think it's gonna be interesting, especially watching a lot of these older guard folks, Spielberg, Abrams, the like, sort of not break, but eventually kind of wrap their head around like, okay, if we're gonna keep going, we've really got to figure out how to hit this all guns blazing. Because for them, you know, it's also not about just like their vanity projects and their own vanity and how they feel, but these are also people who have to recognize that they want their companies to survive further, so that their kids can also be handed a career very easily.
Ooh, which one of them's going to write Spider-Man next?
Spaghetti.
Sorry, that wasn't meant to just be a J.J. Abrams crack. That was meant to be probably everyone in the article crack.
No, there's a couple of people.
But, you know, it's like, eventually, like, some of these folks are going to have to come around and just be like, my company surviving the next 2 or 3 generations far outweighs whether or not you come to see my next film on a 70mm print on a large screen with a cup of popcorn in your hand and your best gal on your arm. Like, it doesn't...
I'm going to read a quote from Tom Rothman, if I may.
I always know I've done well when there's no transition from
No, because I think actually there was a transition from what you were saying, which is the idea of the old guard and who they are in that perspective. And I think we talked about this previously with Spielberg, who I love, frankly. I mean, who doesn't?
Seems very nice.
Well, I'm sure there are people. But my point is this. When you are very much insulated and isolated, it's hard for us to understand the water that we're in, for anyone, right? It takes a lot to try and break out of your own perspective. And when people are in extreme privilege, I don't think they necessarily know that. So Tom Rothman said this: in a world where everything is on demand, I think that's what makes movies special. Exactly because it's harder is why it's more significant leisure choice. Guess what? You can't see the upcoming Quentin Tarantino film Once Upon a Time in Hollywood on your phone right now. If you want to see Leo and Brad together on the screen, the biggest star pairing since Butch and Sundance, settle down. You gotta get a babysitter. My point with that is there's been lots of big star pairings since Butch and Sundance.
Yeah.
It's been a lot of decades.
I think most of them just voiced toys this weekend. Settle down, Tim.
So here's my point. I think he means that, and I think there's probably a piece of that is sincere and true, that there is something special and rarefied, especially as we move forward about the theatrical experience. However, this idea of you got to get a babysitter, kids. Well, $50 is a lot of money for most people. Not you, Tom Rothman, and not you, Steven Spielberg. And I don't think they're even meaning to do this.
Right.
But it's a lot of money for most people. Not only that, a lot of theatrical chains across this nation and the world do not carry all theaters. We had a viewer write into us about the changes in Saudi Arabia around theaters because he had to drive to a different country to see a lot of movies. I mean, that is commitment. That is a cinephile, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, a lot of places in rural America, I'm sure you all watch John Oliver, don't even have broadband, you know? So it's like, this is a very, very narrow perspective of what entertainment is and can be for most people. Thoughts, Danielle?
Yeah, it's, you know, and you mentioned, yes, you do have to get a babysitter. That's expensive. Tickets are expensive. Ticket prices are always going up. It can be expensive, you know, to get the snacks and do everything. It's a heck of a lot cheaper to sit at home, watch whatever's new on streaming, and, like, have a pizza, and you can still have that time with your kids, and you don't have to worry about any of those things. It is, but I think this is one of those, like, frogs in a pot of boiling water thing where the temperature has been, like, kind of increasing, but people weren't noticing it around. And now when everyone's talking about getting a streaming service, now all of a sudden you're feeling like, oh, this water is boiling and we actually have to, like, start treating this like it's something serious.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, with, you know, a lot of smaller filmmakers and other people, they've been treating this like it's serious because, like, they never got the crack to make the big movie. They've always been buy it Netflix. I'll do it myself and put it on YouTube or see if I can do something with YouTube Red. It's these older dudes who are so used to making these huge weekends and being in theaters that now they do feel like probably they're scaling back. Where it's like with the young and up and comers, this is just what it's always been.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. Eric Goldman and I were talking this morning. He went to see Toy Story in IMAX this weekend. And I have the AMC monthly pass, and so does he. But he was thinking, oh, wow, it's like $25 potentially for a ticket. Plus you've brought your kids. Plus you had to park. Plus there's concessions. Like, it's $150 you're looking at to go see a movie. It is a big commitment.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think Roth would have, Tim would have a valid point if the rest of the industry wasn't also cannibalizing and changing and shifting. Like, okay, yeah, it's a special experience. Cool, go out and see it. But like we say, like, everything around it, like the actual movie theater experience itself is changing. Not to macro the hell out of this thing, but just income in general for people in their lives is changing. You know, you can't expect people to drive Lyft a few times a week just so they can go see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Like, that's crazy. So, yeah, if it was still just like a $1.25 and we're going to splurge on some red vines, that's one thing, but it's not anymore. Like,
and you're an advocate for the arts.
Well, I just think it's one of these things where a lot of these guys yearn for the times of old where, you know, you pile half the family into the trunk and they all bust out like clowns from a clown car where you go through to the drive-in. You know what I mean? A lot of these people have a conception of it that's that way. But also, I mean, I think we're really going to start making clear lines of demarcation between streaming type products and movie type products. I mean, in the article, it states that most people go to the movies 4 times a year. And for people like myself, or like probably most of the people at this table, that sounds crazy. You know what I mean? 4 times. You think of 4 times.
But we're crazy. Is the truth.
Yeah, obviously. I know we're the outliers because we're in this industry, but I'm just saying, like, you know, the real people of the world, Jack.
Yeah.
They go to the movies 4 times a year.
Right.
And then you look at Nancy Utley in the.
I'm sorry. I'm accidental.
So you know that Ryan keeps dinging the bell at us, and we keep thinking, what did we do wrong? That's usually it's Pavlovian.
No, you guys are great. Keep going.
Billy trained me to think that I have done something incredibly wrong at that point.
Well, no, it's Pavlovian. Yeah. But
everything's falling apart right off camera. It's amazing.
It's great.
Nancy Utley said that there's something about there's supposed to be this concept of rising to the level of theatricality. That there's going to be this new standard for movies, and then, you know, Amy Pascal said, well, if we're going to start self-censoring, like, okay, this is this and this is that, and not even trying to release some of these so-called smaller or mid movies into theaters, it'll be a self-fulfilling prophecy that certain things will be shunted off certain ways.
Yeah, and then you see the success of mid-level films over the last couple of years. Things like Crazy Rich Asians and Girls Tripping. These were smaller films that did very, very well in theaters. So,
so what Amy's positing is a world where stuff like that literally couldn't happen, which is obviously bad and wrong.
Well, let's hear from Ava, shall we? DuVernay. So this is what she said, and I think that she was sort of speaking from the perspective of, obviously she's had a big budget film in theaters, she's had smaller films in theaters, and she's certainly doing a lot of work with Netflix right now, as well as she has a show on OWN. So she says there's a privilege embedded in a theatrical release because I've had it. I've seen it and I know what it is. It's a lot of ego. I'm told by the system that this is what matters. But then people aren't seeing your movies. Take the number of people who saw Selma, a Christmas release with an Oscar campaign about Dr. Martin Luther King. Well, more than a quadruple amount of people saw 13th, which is her Netflix documentary about the prison industrial complex. If I'm telling these stories to reach a mass audience, then really nothing else matters. Thoughts?
I mean, again, this is what we've been touching on. Like, this is that guard who doesn't want to admit that maybe if you're going to get more people to see something on a Netflix, then why is that? Why are we treating Netflix and streaming like it's the ghetto? Like it's not worthy of, you know, my movie is art and it's not, you know, Netflix hasn't earned the right to show my whatever. Who are you? You know, like if that's where the audience is, then that's where the audience is.
That's right, Spielberg. Who are you? He's on Apple. That's who, by the way.
Yeah, he'll be fine. And yes, also he teamed up with someone because he recognizes that it's important. And, you know, and it is, and not to get, again, too into the weeds with it, but it can be a classist, like, argument because $10 a month for everything that's been made, or a lot of things that will be made, is a heck of a lot simpler for a lot of people. And there's also, you know, when you look at the way that the theater experience has also changed, you know, now we've got comforters, like, you know, these huge, you know, like rocking chairs, and you can like put your feet up. They're serving you pasta. You can like get mussels with shells and a glass of champagne while you watch Endgame.
Which cannibalized movie theater chains, which is why tickets went up, and which is why no one can afford to go to the movies anymore, which is why we're here, because Walmart the theater came in with their recliners and chased everybody else out of town. I think there's something really interesting with what
you Endgame though.
That's a good muscles Endgame.
And also, I'm happy that we're all crazy together. Like we can be that group of people that goes to see 4 movies a week.
There's something inherently frustrating about what DuVernay is having to say about that too, because when you pair that with what Amy Pascal said about sort of it's going to be this or that. it's either going to be you're on the big screen. Who gets an invite to make?
Yep.
It's going to be the frogs that are still hanging out. Like those are that who is who for the next couple years is like it's the ultimate gate.
But also it isn't just a monolith of the people who want the theatrical part to be part of what validates movies. Because even Octavia Spencer in the article states that she would like ideally at least a limited release to be able to be like, okay, that way it qualifies for all the big awards. You can't really as Danielle stated ghettoize these things if it's available and worthy. What's that, valid for these awards? To be put up for those if it's eligible. Excuse me.
I just think to go off of what she was saying about like if that's where the audience is, that's where I've got to go. There's a frustrating angle to that in that also means you're going to be making less. Everyone that works for you is going to. It's you always make fun of like the Craigslist posts that are like, be in my movie. There's nudity and you have to jump off a mountain, but you'll be paid an exposure.
There's crafting.
There will be snacks.
Get your orange slices.
And 2,000 people respond to that ad because that's how dark this industry is, people.
I just think that that's such like a scary, weird place that people as artists now have to veer, where it's like we know that these paydays are going to be smaller. We know that these mountains are going to be a little shorter.
Also though, the paydays are going to be smaller for the traditional model. You know what I mean? And now there's all these different models. It's almost like, I don't want to be reductive of these guys because obviously when the world shifts under your feet, you know what I mean? It's hard for you to catch up. You know what I mean? It's like you're the best wagon wheel maker, and now we got jets and stuff. It's like, but dude, these wagon wheels are important. I think everything should have a wagon wheel release. You know what I mean? And you start sounding really stupid.
Why not
really
have wagons
quick.
on jets?
It's like wagons and jets can coexist, like Dinotopia.
I'd sit in a wagon on a jet.
Just rolling around in coach.
She was like, wood
They
grain.
call it coach. Put a wagon on the jet.
You got a wood grain stick in your F-16.
By the way, that's why they call it code. That's where that comes from.
Well, I mean, roads are as wide as they are to accommodate stagecoaches still to this day. So I get all that, but Jason Blum was talking about in the article about how like nowadays, even if you go to the streaming thing, and they're talking about Ava DuVernay had a quote in there talking about her niece just watches 5-minute clips of nothing.
Yes, I was going to get to that.
That's what she said. Yeah, she said.
I want to read the full quote from her because I think this is the point that you're trying to make about how our brains do not work the same way as By the way, one of the things that was pointed out in this article really quickly was that young people, and this is by Kumail Nanjiani, are not watching movies. They're watching YouTube. So I want to take this moment to say, thank you for making my life possible, young people.
Young people.
Absolutely. That's the one.
Yeah, that deserved it. That's A, and he was saying he was in a bar with a friend of his who was a big Hollywood director, and he said they're not watching movies. They turned to like a random 25-year-old and asked it what was her favorite movie, and she said, no, I don't watch those. And that was that. And the same thing, I heard the same thing again. Eric is a friend who teaches junior high. They're not watching them. I know my friends' kids, they're not. They're watching YouTube.
Our producer Ryan's never seen an Avengers movie.
Thank you. He's never seen a movie
But
in
plenty
his
of
life.
Avengers Reacts videos.
Well,
And this is what she said. She said, my nieces and nephews don't really care about produced content in the way that we do traditionally. My niece can sit there and watch IGTV. Those are the Instagram videos. IGTV for hours, which is on her phone, on Instagram. And it's basically little clips of nothing. Not always, but mostly.
Sometimes it's great.
That's why when I hear people being so rigid and strict about certain forms and presentations, it just reminds me of that Simpsons cartoon, Old Man Yells at Cloud. True.
And Katzenberg in the article goes, the first generation he's counting, first generation was movies, and they were 2-hour narratives designed to be watched in one sitting in a movie theater. The second gen was TV, which is 1-hour chapters that were designed to be watched in front of a television. The third gen, which I think is what we're supposed to be in right now, is merging 2-hour stories, and what he thinks is going to happen is we're going to do 2-hour stories in 7 to 10 minute chunks.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the first gen was where, look, it's a train coming at us. That was the first gen, right?
He's counting modern people, not people afraid of the light.
No, I know. What I'm saying is, like, things change. Things have radically changed. And there was a response theatrically to the radio, right? Thinking like, oh, people are just going to stay home and listen to the radio now. And talkies, came in, and there was a response to television, and that was like CinemaScope and color and like big. We gotta get big, and there has been a response to streaming, and that will just continue. And
Remakes.
theatrical, remakes.
But also, and we've talked about this before, though. The thing about Jason Blum said, you're also competing with people who don't need to make a profit, i.e., Apple and stuff.
Yeah.
Apple's like, yo, we're gonna make money somehow because you're gonna buy these phones. We got this preloaded dope HBO on the phone, whatever, and it's not competing with the theatrical nor the streaming model directly. You know what I mean?
The point that he was making was that exactly that Netflix, Apple and Amazon specifically are selling you other things. Like, how do you correlate the profit or not of any given TV show for Apple when they're just selling 100 million more iPhones and that's where they're getting the money?
Yep.
Same thing. Like, they're selling you diapers on Amazon, so they don't have to make this profit. And now Netflix and every other content service has to compete with that, and it's an impossible game to play. But
Sell merch.
sell merch. Okay.
Yeah, you gotta sell
Business
merch on the
model us.
road.
Yeah, do a merch tab.
The Netflix store.
The Netflix store, where you can buy, your Chucky dolls. or you
I
can
also
buy,
agree that there should be more Netflix merch
there should be just do it.
Yeah.
Make merch. Sell things. We will buy it. We consume.
for like Stranger Things things.
Yeah,
And
like Stranger Things things. Mm-hmm.
Or like, what if they just start selling groceries?
I would
just
watch
like in
that.
addition
And
to-
chill.
Yeah.
It's all frozen things.
Well, there's
Yeah.
there's the Miss Maisel lunch on Postmates, sir.
It's true. It's very true.
Here's another quote really quick. To your point about the way that we watch things, talking about binge watching a television show.
Yeah.
And what makes this hard is it's this weird psychological barrier where you watch 45-minute episode of a TV show and you're like, okay, I have time for that. I don't have time for a 2-hour movie right now, but I can have time for that. And 8 fucking hours later, you are still there.
Yeah.
But it's a twofold. It's a trick where the smaller chunks get you to watch more things. Ryan's trying to teach us these tricks. But also your mind wants more. And after a 2-hour movie experience is done, you don't have that more.
Right.
So you've been trained to get more of the same thing. So like, if you're gonna make one rom-com, make 10. Because when I'm done watching To All the Boys I've Loved Before, thank you, I did want more. I wanted the next one.
Yep.
Yeah, you wanted to
Give
be
me
able
that-
to watch Always Be My Maybe or something like that.
More
yeah.
Noah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what Elizabeth Banks was talking about. She said that she's really heartened. She's trying to find the light in it, and she was really heartened by the fact that theaters don't seem to be that interested in rom-coms anymore. And as much as people try to fight it, it seems to be going that way or flowing that way presently. And it seems like all the streamers are just like, yeah, this sort of mid-budget and some of these mid-stars and emerging stars and stuff, this is our wheelhouse. We can do this as good as anybody, frankly. And they're proving it with things like Always Be My Maybe and stuff like that. So I think that's a good development because those movies aren't going away. They're not going the way of the dodo or going the way of the Western, as I've talked about many times. They're not doing that. They're going to another platform.
The Western was massively oversaturated, though, to be fair.
Yeah.
There were like 400 of them a year.
Well, how many times does Tom Hanks got to meet Meg Ryan? How many times?
A lot.
He got to meet all these different ways. Like,
There's a number of ways to
I
meet
met a
Meg
beauty at the
Ryan.
roller derby. Jesus.
So hang on. Here's something that I'm going to make Joe sad.
Yay. It's not hard.
Joe, these are the quotes that I think made you sad, and tell me if I'm wrong. Coming from Jason Blum, who, like, if we're going to listen to anybody, we should listen to him. He was talking about how, yes, I would have liked people to watch Whiplash, which is a great movie, and you definitely should watch it if you haven't yet. I would have liked people to watch Whiplash in theaters. However, I'd also like there to be no traffic in Los Angeles. That's also not realistic. Agree, there's no point to fight reality. And then 2 was that he talked about how he was aware that, I think it's my phone. Is it my phone or your phone?
I'm sorry.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Everybody send Ryan some love.
Send Ryan some love.
He's a good kid. He works hard.
Yeah, Ryan's
He watches the YouTube.
he's doing all the
He
work.
keeps us young.
He's,
Yeah.
He's literally pulling his collar up. Like he's
I'm like,
He's trying to disappear into the chair. It's so funny.
Okay, so Jason Blum, the other thing that he talked about was essentially understanding that when people were watching things on streaming, that maybe they were watching things in chunks. Like, oh, I saw some of that movie would be
Yeah.
something that they'll
Yeah.
say. And Yeah, I mean,
I watched a lot of that. I've heard a lot of people. I watched a lot of that.
Yeah, I
watched some of that.
They just sort
Yeah.
of quit right before the end. Of just like, I don't really care if the aliens catch the guy or whatever.
Yeah. But to his point, I mean, I was thinking about that the other day because watch time is something we talk a lot about, and I was lamenting, and I was like, imagine a world in which I just made a thing that people watched all of because it was in a place to do that, like, and it was like appropriately placed in an area where people were tuning in to watch a thing. I was talking about this with my boyfriend. And he's like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like a movie or a TV show where you're just watching it because you watch the whole thing. But that doesn't even happen with movies or TV shows anymore, is what he was saying. And he's like, hey, I'd rather than watch half of the horror movie than none at all.
Ooh, that does hurt. And it's also, even if people are watching the whole thing, you're still only getting half of their attention because they're on their phone at the same time.
Yeah.
That's
Don't
just-
you do that?
I absolutely do.
I
Yeah.
absolutely do.
I do that and I'm watching the second half of the horror movie on my phone while I watch the first half on TV.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That way I get more content into my head.
We're going to get to content, don't you worry, sir.
That word.
But I'm asking all of us to own it right now. If you find it challenging to pay attention to one thing, because we've been trained not to.
Well, I'm drawing right now, so I don't know
Yeah.
what you're talking about. I literally don't know what you're talking about.
It still depends for me. If we are watching like a competition show or something like that, I'm not paying attention until the key moments where I know I need to pay attention. I've like Gordon Ramsay has Pavlov trained me, and,
dude, but also
and the
you're-
moment I hear him say something like "Steven, bring up your dish," I'm like, what are we
But
doing?
also, you're trained by
Pasta?
those
Okay.
sound effects that they've been using since the Precambrian.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
like, it looks like my lobster might be undercooked. Meow. On the on the soundtrack.
And,
so.
and I do find myself, and I don't know if this is the result of streaming or just, well, this is kind of just the way I've always been my entire life, but I will find myself being like, oh, that guy's familiar. Who's that guy? Oh,
Yeah.
he's in there. Hey, he was, and like, what just happened in the scene while I was trying to figure out which guy was that guy?
That's
Yeah.
what's wild about like Amazon. You'll be watching stuff on Amazon, and then you can just press pause, and like whoever's in the scene, you can go to their IMDb page and go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
We've been doing a lot because
man.
yeah.
we're finally watching Deadwood, and because our HBO's through Amazon, and we've been doing that a lot. Just pause mid. Someone worked really hard to edit the pacing and tension of that scene, and we're just like, hey, that waiter's familiar.
Like, hey, is that Veronica Mars?
Yeah, it is. That's Kristen Bell. Like, yeah, we've been doing that
What's
a lot.
she doing in the Old West? Is it Kristen Bell in Deadwood?
She
she's in a
was.
couple episodes.
She was.
Oh, very
Yeah.
good, very good.
Yeah.
I think that there's a book that I read many years ago called Faster, and it was basically about technology and how it is moving at a pace that we are not adapted to. We truly aren't adapted to. It's just moving so much faster than we can process. We all know that. But I was having dinner with a friend of mine this weekend, and we were she said, I'm really scared. I keep doing things like I'll buy water and leave it. Or she left her laptop on a plane the other day and things like that. And I said, when you're at work, how many tabs do you have open? And she was like, yeah, like infinite tabs. Me too. And we have trained ourselves out of the ability to focus. And one of the only places that I am forced to focus is in a movie theater because
Right.
it's rude not to and to take out your phone and do all those other things.
Yeah, I'm not even exaggerating
Yeah.
when I say that the time when we are doing a live show is probably the longest I go without checking my phone.
Yeah.
And that's not
But I
good.
noticed you do have your phone in case.
Just in case. It's off, but just in case. What if I need to fact check something?
Yeah.
What if Ryan's fact checking and I'm fact checking and we've got to fact check each other? Or what if he's too busy doing fact checking and we need another fact check?
Well, now I gotta take my phone out.
Yeah, take out your phone.
Well, I got mine propped up, so.
I have a laptop open. I'm not paying attention to
I got an email
90%
from
of what
Peggy.
you guys are saying. it is an interesting thing. There's a sadness, I think, around that, or as you start to, it starts to become harder and harder for us to simply be equipped to think the same way as people that were raised fully immersed in that, because we weren't. I am making us sound very old today, and I apologize to everyone at the
don't
same
you think? Don't you think? Just on the positive side, because like I said, it's all like the sky's falling at jazz. I just feel like
No, I'm
maybe,
all for streaming.
Well, but I'm just saying, I think maybe that's going to be the lasting appeal of the theatrical experience, is that it is indeed an experience. And obviously it's expensive, and obviously there's bars to entry, and obviously that might cause, I don't know, next 10 years, maybe there's family theaters where you can bring you and a bunch of bum kids, sit on a damn ground and play with toys and stuff, have a big thing, drink some beers, chill out in a thing that isn't so like seats facing something, but like big ass screen.
So like the playground at IKEA?
Circle, something like that. Like, corn dogs and stuff. Whatever, kids are doing stuff, and there's a soundproof room right here. There's a big glass, so you can see all the kids. So if they're breaking stuff, you can see them destroying stuff, but you can't hear them. Boom, there's a screen there, so something like that, to where it's encompassing.
I think you need a Shark Tank that.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie.
You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, the world's going to evolve that way, whether I do it or not. It's like, it's all, I'm a conduit, baby.
Yeah. You're just a conduit for the universe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I mean,
you
that
can't
is-
own the creativity.
Yeah, man.
The world owns
It
it.
flows through me.
It's not. I mean, that is the next step. If we're already, like I said, we've already got, everyone's got their daddy chair, and that's what you sit in now when you go to the theaters. I mean, the next step is just to bring in your whole damn living room.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I think maybe we'll see. I mean,
We're going to partner with Rent-A-Center.
Yeah.
try out this living room
Just
set.
to be clear, I am all for not fighting the tides of change. We have seen how we view entertainment change a lot over the years. We do not have silent films anymore. We largely and rarely, except for you, Roma, which I loved absolutely, we don't really have black and white films anymore. There's a number of things that have changed, and it will continue to change, and that's called life. So I think fighting it is silly. But the other thing too is that there's a lot of positive about it. One, Netflix is doing very well in terms of having a diverse array of filmmakers.
Yes.
The studios are playing catch up with Netflix and Amazon. Two is and this can be good and bad, creators have a lot of freedom. Now, there's something to be said for notes sometimes. But sometimes it means you do get incredibly interesting different films and not cookie cutter films. And three is, like I said, people don't have access everywhere to these films in theaters. So it's like somebody was talking about, we still need sort of the festivals and things like that to shine a light on things like Moonlight. That's probably true. And they do serve a purpose, but then probably more people saw Moonlight and they'd been made aware of it at home, than they did in theaters. I don't have the data on that, but I'd have to guess. So I think there's a ton of good that the streaming services are doing. And to you guys' point, like, we're just going to have to accept that the theatrical experience is just going to evolve into something new again. Yeah. What will it be? 3D, James Cameron? No, that's
4D drone box.
Yeah.
You're gonna spit put a bunch of spray bottles and just shoot you when you're going through a waterfall. All that jazz. I really
Like
hate
a
that.
bad cat?
Yeah, exactly. I really hate that stuff. Honestly, I would really like the movie to do the work of putting me there rather than being rattled around or anything. I'm really,
those chairs?
Yeah,
I hate
I'm really
those.
not.
I don't need to be rumble shocked.
Yeah. But I can
Like
see
I'm playing Call of Duty or something.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's probably something to VR and AR,
I don't know.
not necessarily in a theater.
I feel, and again, it might just be because I'm not paying attention to that field, but I do feel like even just last year, everyone was like, VR, baby! Like, here it comes!
10 years, 12 years, 15 years ago, people were talking about VR. Like, VR is the flying car. At this point, obviously, it's getting closer and closer.
Is it
right
the
now,
hoverboard?
There are there's hover bikes in Dubai. Right now, they got hover bikes. They can just hover around. You know what I mean?
We just have Lime scooters.
Dubai's crazy, man.
I mean, they got Paul Blart Mall cops on hover bikes. I mean, they're in the future, dude. So it's like, I feel like a lot of stuff is coming down the pike.
Man.
I do agree with you on the studio sort of running to catch up on the array of voices thing too, and I think
I'd love there
part
to
of
be
that,
a minority filmmaker arms race. I'd love that to be a real thing. Boy, I'd love that to be a real thing.
I mean, because one thing that I think has been proven is that if you start servicing a community that traditionally hasn't been serviced, the little bit of money, that 4 times a year that people go out, they will make one of those movies one of their 4 times. Like that's a fact.
That's
Yeah.
a plain fact that we've seen over the last
Yeah.
few years with a number of films. So that's great, you know. Here's a question about creativity, and then I do want to do a little content dive, which is this. Here's what Paul Feig said. In Lawrence of Arabia, one of the greatest shots of all time is when he comes over the vast landscape as this tiny little dot on a camel. And there are moments when you want to do a cool shot like that, but you go, when people are watching this on their phone, they're not going to see anything. It's a terrible way to have to think, but you have to keep it in your brain. Even when we're doing an insert shot, writing from a computer screen, I'm like, yeah, but you got to make that bigger because when somebody's on their phone, they're not going to be able to read that. Thoughts on the limitations of the fact that Joe is watching things on his phone and then his TV?
Man, even here, you know, Dan Merle had to break me of my goofy thumbnails. Like when I did, it could have been worse. Those thumbnails looked insane. Like my first drafts, and then like if this is my screen, Dan would be like, okay, there it is. And then he'd just like walk across the room and be like, can you see what's on the thumb? Fix it!
Yeah.
He got me. He's one of the people who was like, no, remember, like phone, especially for us, like phone.
Yeah,
people
phone.
watching this on the phone.
I assume not watching mostly too, listening. Right?
Listening, yeah. But it's like,
Yeah.
we're looking at everything on just like big monitors, and he'd be the one to be like, okay, now walk 30 feet back, and how's that look?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's. I would hope that we don't start really leaning into that sort of idea of like, but people are going to watch it on their phone. Because hopefully they're not always. Like, I'm hoping that's on the consumer end more, where we're like, that shot probably looked cool if I wasn't watching this on my phone, but it is what it is, and today I'm watching it on my phone. Maybe next week I watch it in my living room.
Do you watch? True question. Do you guys watch stuff on your phone? I really never. Oh,
I totally do.
Well, I watch
too.
YouTube. Yeah, I watch YouTube on my phone. I don't watch movies on my phone because I'm old. Like, that's my line. I'll watch, but I do stuff my dad would never do. My dad would never be watching basketball with a basketball podcast in his ear while he was drawing on his iPad. By definition, because he didn't have those devices. But he would never even done that. He would have never thought to do that sort of thing. He was really concentrated. He sanded wood, type person. He would never have multitasked like that. It wouldn't even have occurred to him. So I think we're all. I don't know if it's evolution or devolution, baby, but it's something's happening.
Yeah.
You hear those things about the bone spurs on the back of people's necks because we're craning. We're
We're doing
down
this, so we're getting these.
is that what's wrong?
We're
with
growing
it?
horns.
There's these-
We're growing
No, I'm really
horns.
asking.
They're
Is
calling
it-
them horns. I'm
Wait.
calling them spurs to not be
feel me.
inflammatory.
No. Because I have many problems with my neck.
That's when we found out. Ooh. Ah! Ooh.
That sounded like Steven Seagal in the 90s.
I felt that through my phone.
Jeez
Hey.
Louise. That was the end of Mark for Death. Get out of here.
Between Roth's neck and my arms, we're just like the banged up corner over here.
That sounded like you were about to challenge Agent Smith to round 2. Damn.
I mean, I am.
I don't really watch any stuff on my phone.
I really don't.
I do,
watch
but I
it.
think it's mostly because I take the bus, so I wind up watching things or catching up on stuff a lot because I waste so much time on that stupid bus.
Yeah. Okay. Is that an enjoyable experience?
It's fun.
Okay. Very good.
It's it's not the same. But
My
it
phone
gets it
watching,
done.
I feel like, is mostly the stuff that was made for the medium. Like, you want to just endlessly scroll through some cat hashtags on Instagram. Like,
Yeah, I
that's
do.
my phone stuff.
My phone stuff is cats too. Not surprisingly.
Yeah.
So, circling back to what Feig's talking about, then, are we going to make the movie Scrooged come true? Where he's like, do you know how many people in this country own dogs? And we are not programming to those dogs. Like, sorry.
There's I think
cut.
there's like a couple of YouTube channels that program to animals.
Yeah.
There really are. I want to play them for my
jump in.
Yeah, I mean, look. There's good and bad to everything, as we know. But I think that is sad in a way that you can't sort of have these epic scale shots. There is something that feels different about seeing something in a theater. I saw Booksmart in a theater, which is a movie that was very, very critically acclaimed, did not do that well in theaters. Probably would have a much better shot on streaming.
For sure.
But I saw it in a theater and I was asking myself, would I feel differently about this movie if I had seen it on streaming? I feel like I would. like I saw it in the theater, and there was a sense, there was just a larger scale in my mind about what it was.
Right.
And then if I think I would have said, oh, there was this cute little movie on Netflix this weekend, you know?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Like it would have felt. I don't know if that. I really don't know if it feels more or less significant, because Roma felt very significant to me, and I saw that on Netflix. Anyway, what do you think?
Well, I mean, part of that is what you're saying is it's the experience of like, I am here to watch this thing. I can't just take a phone call in the middle of watching it, which there is. I do think that except for things that we've set up where it's, you know, event viewing, where, you know, what Game of Thrones became, and for a lot of, you know, folks, there's a difference when you are able to just get up and go to your own bathroom in the middle of it. It does change, I think, the way that your brain thinks of it. You know, like I could take a call, I could check a tweet, I could do whatever. Whereas when you were in the theater, like this is what you came to do, you paid to be there. And if you do any of the other of those activities, you suck and are a jerk.
Well, and also, I think it precludes us from some people from making films. If we start to go too down this rabbit hole of like, oh, you can constantly just turn off stuff in 7 minutes and this and that. Like I saw a movie called Mandy, and I don't think it's the greatest movie made of all times, but I saw it at a screening at the Egyptian, and I was like trapped with it. And I was like, there were several times where if this was played on my phone or on my iPad or on my TV, I turn it off and be like, man, I need to drink water. You know, like you
need to rewatch Mandy.
I did, but like when I was sitting in it though, the droning and the monstrousness of like the soundtrack and the oppressiveness of what was going on and all the stuff I couldn't escape was part of the experience.
Yeah.
And the fact that I couldn't leave without going, excuse me,
Yeah.
pardon me, over 50 damn dudes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That was part of the experience. And I think, yeah, we're gonna. I hope we don't start denying ourselves categorically of things of that nature. Because I know somebody bought Mandy. Somebody's gonna, from what I say, which is flattering myself to the utmost degree. Somebody might say, "Oh, I'll buy Mandy on Apple and try to watch it on a damn phone," and be like, "This is weird."
But there's kind of like not a false narrative, but like there's the precise. And Mandy did really, really well on Amazon. Joe loved it. I really enjoyed it, but it did incredibly well, and then everybody said, oh, it should have gotten a theatrical release because it would have done so well in theaters. That's like not necessarily true.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
It would have been one, because people like to go, oh, in the old days too, but like a lot of the stuff you loved from the old days did terribly, and you just love it and feel like it's big because it's always been present in
Like
your
It's
life.
a Wonderful Life.
Well,
Yeah.
Well, it
It's a
used to be
bomb.
more of the
Yeah.
loss leader model. It seemed like back in the days, it was like, look, guys, we're gonna. My studio characters are coming back. But look, guys, we got 50 things. We got a book by some broad. We got this. We got that. 50 of them. We throw them out there. 2 of them are gonna make money.
Yeah.
It's not that way anymore. Everything is important. When Dumbo fails, it's even important for the mouse, baby. It's even. It's important that these things go, and because the slates are so big and everything costs $200 million and all this jazz, and So I think back in the days, we revere Taxi Driver. I think Taxi Driver turned out to be a hit, but it cost nothing, as we talked about maybe last time.
Yeah.
Well, all this adventurousness for
stuff
nothing.
Like, we look back, we're like, oh, in the old days, like there was such a bigger reverence for horror movies and stuff like that. But like the Evil Dead movies, like weren't these massive 5-year run successes. They just feel that way because we've grown up surrounded by Evil Dead posters and loving Bruce Campbell.
Well, and a lot of those movies, they find their second footing when they went to the home market.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like that was what wound up happening. They didn't work in theaters, and they wound up becoming cult hits once you could watch it at home.
The
later on
Last
leisure.
Dragon.
Yep.
The Last Dragon. Oh my gosh, so
Yeah, that
many
didn't
more
make any
people
money.
know. So many more people know about that movie from.
But the sort of the response thing is interesting to me because in our household, we're really big How to Train Your Dragon fans. We saw the first 2 in the theater, adore both of them. We didn't get a chance to see the third one in the theatrical run. We just watched it this weekend. And it's probably ranks number 3 of the 3 for me. And I wonder if, we finished it and we were like, that was fun. But then immediately had a fun, like, I didn't hate it, but here's what I'd fix conversation. And I wonder if we had seen it in the theater, especially my wife, who's very emotionally attached to those movies. I wonder if going to see it in the theater versus us watching it at home would have, like, impacted further to the left or to the right or to the positive or to the con. These are a big deal, and now we're in the theater treating it like a big deal, and maybe it didn't land as solidly as it needed to, or something like that. What does that do versus we watched it at home and then turned
Feels
on
more
Deadwood.
disposable, right?
Yeah, a
Or
little more.
something.
Yeah,
Yes.
maybe. Yeah, I don't
Yes.
know. I'd be curious.
What's the difference between seeing a comedy on like a little phone? Like when people watch stand-up comedy clips on a phone, that blows my mind. I can't even appreciate comedy on the phone. I want to be in the room with you. I want to the
Yeah,
vibe,
I can't watch
the energy.
I only like comedy when it's live. I don't like watching. And I used to, when I was younger, like I adored all the stand-up specials and everything, but I think just like having done stand-up for so long and seeing the difference between how it feels, and that's the other thing that you get with the movie theater experience, is that you are collectively all part of this group and you're feeding on each other's energy. And that's something that you get with a live performance and something that you get with a movie theater performance that you don't get when you're watching it on your phone or when you're on the bus.
It's true. I mean, look, there's always something to be said for the theatrical experience. I do want to say though, in terms of Paul Feig's quote, because that one actually did make me a little sad because
Yeah.
Sure.
I do love beautiful cinematography. However, those restrictions, that's what creativity is born of, those restrictions.
Yeah.
And these technological changes allow things to blossom. So I brought up It's a Wonderful Life, right? It was not acclaimed. It was a massive box office bomb. The reason that it became what it is and I happen to think, I love that movie and I think it's genius. But the reason that it became what it is because of syndicate. It was really cheap to syndicate at Christmas time on television. And then that just ended up happening every year. And so generation grew up with it like, oh, that's the Christmas movie. We watch It's a Wonderful Life. And then people examined its like creative merit after that, which I think is warranted. But that's interesting. The same thing with something like Breaking Bad, right? Breaking Bad on FX was not doing that well. The ratings weren't that high. And then it came out. Sorry, AMC. Thank you. Whoa, an actual fact check. AMC. And I just credit FX with everything because they do amazing work. But in this case, they didn't. So the point is, it came out on Netflix. People were able to binge it. And then suddenly Breaking Bad was a phenomenon. And this is, to me, one of the greatest television shows of our generation. So it is this, there is no right or wrong answer in any of this. And I think maybe that's what we have to accept, is be comfortable in the ambiguity. And that's a life lesson too. At the end of the day.
Well, and also context is key.
It really is.
All of these different, things that we find ourselves in, all these different situations we find ourselves in artistically and all this kind of jazz. It's really, it's the times we're living in. We're living in interesting times, as the Chinese proverb says. And
All times
we have
are interesting.
Yeah, we have new things to deal with, just like everybody has, and we're just dealing with ours. With a little bit more of a immediate reaction to my my disappointment with the theater experience. Hey everybody, we're this culture now. We can tell each other how dissatisfied we are with every damn thing instantly, and that's going to change us as a people. The fact that we can do that. Yeah.
Well, it makes you recognize the prevalence of our tendency as humans to see things from a negative lens, myself included, I'm sure. So I'm going to talk about content. So this is a word that we were asked about on Twitter. Dan Purcell said, "What do you guys think?" They were using the word content a ton in this article, and he was like, "I don't know if I love that."
That depressed me. Seeing a conversation that includes J.J. Abrams and they're calling movies content. Made me sad. Sorry. Go ahead.
Just the
Hate
further
that word.
commodification of art, where it's not just art; it is something to be consumed.
It's all
and
stuff.
It's all stuff. It's content.
Well, but see that is, though, I gotta say, that is an almost necessary evolution of us
Agreed.
talking about these things, because the IG videos on the phone, the YouTube videos. I watched this guy, shout out Dan, the Lakers fan. He's probably got 300. I don't know how many subscribers he has. Not that many, but he's got enough for me to watch him. And he's just a guy who rants about the Lakers like me. I like him. He's just a guy. And he is as famous to me as anybody. And sometimes the guys like us are as famous as anybody to some people.
That's
because
weird.
that weirds you out, right? You go to Comic-Con and you just take a picture. I've been doing comedy 10 years. Nobody's trying to take a damn picture. Hey, take a picture of the headliner feature. You were pretty funny, but take a picture.
You'll get pictures this year.
Oh, no, I know.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, it was eye-opening the last couple times going to Comic-Con and actually being recognized as a content creator. Don't say famous person, say content creator, because it's different. But again, by definition, we have to start defining these things.
And that is a humbling and weird experience. I remember my boss at IGN, when we would, it was a lot sometimes with the comments, like soul sucking and crushing at the same time somehow. First they crush you, then they just rip you to shreds. And he was like, you're not a human being, because you're getting, particularly these videos are being viewed more than some television shows are, which is not true always, and frankly, I wish was true here. but so you're not even a human being. So when they're saying something nasty to you, it's not to a real person. It's just to this like ephemeral thing on a screen. Yeah. So that is an interesting evolution, because I think that's what celebrities felt like to me as a kid, like a not real thing. Right. A movie star was like.
Yeah, and now we're broadening we're broadening the terminology for what a star is, what a notable person is, what a public figure is, even. What do these checks mean? What does this mean? What does that mean? There's like a mom with a cool blog, and she's got a blue check. You know why? Because she's got an audience that's just as big as a lot of. Her audience is as big as AP Bio. Holler.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
It's not even the 15 minutes of fame now. It's like everybody gets to be kind of famous.
Yes.
Like everyone gets to be a little well known.
Right. It is the true democratization in that way, though, because I don't know if you guys remember this from. I think it was in the last Mad Max, but they were talking about the world before, which is what Mad Max likes to do. The world before, it was all a desert, and they were like, everyone had their own show then, like literally everyone, and that's what it feels like to me now. Like that's who we are in the world.
Oh yeah, no, I agree.
We're the randos in a room.
I just don't like that word. If you got big doing makeup tutorials, you got big doing makeup tutorials. They're called makeup tutorials.
Yeah, but to be fair, and this is what when Dan asked the question, he said, what do you think of this? I just don't, I think it's a weird way to describe art and film. And I was like, as Joe Starr says, we lost the war when we let it be called content. But counterpoint to your point, Ed, is it's just a useful way to encapsulate a lot of things. Otherwise, it just gets hard and clunky. Yeah. Because
there's so many different kinds.
And it's the distribution of it and the form create the context, and there's no good word for a lot of what we do. What are we doing right now? Literal question.
Yeah. And I recognize there's a good bit of me going like, no, get out of my yard. I'm here. It's just me looking for just a little bit of like, I'm here. And you're here. Like I recognize there is a little bit of that to not liking that term, blanket term.
I just remember when the Truman Show was a dystopian nightmare, not actual reality, that people were trying to fabricate around themselves.
Well, but the thing is, they had to trick the differences, and it's sort of like Big Brother also, is that Big Brother was not forced on us. Like, we couldn't wait to update.
Yeah. Let me tell Big Brother what's up.
We can't wait to get the next Big Brother into our home so she can turn the lights on for us. What the
and you feel like a stupid old ass for being like, I don't want no damn robot listening to all my conversations.
I don't have an Alexa, and that is why. My phone and my computer are listening enough. I don't need to add a third thing. But it's true. And the same thing is true of the Truman Show. Like, they had to trick Truman. We can't wait to we're such exhibitionists. Like, God damn it, look at me. I'm
Please.
If you don't, I don't exist. I'm fairly sure.
Right.
Yep.
And that's been a moment of existentialism. Anyway, that's my Monday.
I see you guys.
This has literally been our whole show. We had other topics. But sorry, Eric, we're not going to talk about the toys today, but you guys can talk about it later this week. We went long on this one. Content is king. And as a result, we have a junket video for you to look at. Yay! Kim was at the Toy Story. Kim was at the Toy Story junket and got some very funny things from actors who are famous. Look at it now on YouTube's Meme It. Meme.
Forky is the most important toy to Bonnie right now. We all have to make sure nothing happens to him.
Toy Story 4 is the sequel none of us knew we needed. What was the thinking behind making another sequel after it had such a stellar finishing point, seemingly, in Toy Story 3?
Yeah, I had the same feeling when we were talking about doing a fourth one. I thought we were done. But the thinking behind it was that the end of Toy Story 3, which is so amazing, is the end of Woody's time with Andy, but it's not the end of Woody's story. And we realized if we kind of chase down what is next for Woody, now that he's in a new bedroom with a new kid, it's not going to be the same as Andy's. It just can't be. And once we started going down that route, it was kind of like, well, if we do that, then we should, this would happen, and then this. So the story really did kind of build itself, and we found a way that I think nicely ties up Woody's arc.
Yeah, you know, Andrew Stanton was the first one to kind of suggest it. It's something he had been cooking up while he was working on Toy Story 3. He's been a part of these films since the beginning. And he came to us and he was like, you know what? I've never seen Toy Story 3 as the ending, where these movies are all about Woody. And this now is the next chapter in his life. He's going to have a new purpose. He's in a new space. He's with a new kid. And that seemed worth exploring. That and bringing back Bo Peep.
Bo! What are you doing here?
No time to explain. Come with me.
We need to get back to our kid.
Aw, Sheriff Woody.
We find out that Woody in the film was made in the 50s.
Yes.
So in your mind, do you know what he was doing between then and finding Andy?
Oh, that's a good question. Woody has this great implied history to him that we've kind of doled out a little bit in Toy Story 2. But I think the real point of it dramatically for us is he has survived. He has been important all these years. He has found a way to be there for his kid and all the things he's talked about all these years. So he's had the longest tenure of kind of doing the job of a toy. And of course, in contrast to many of the other toys, some in which we meet in this film that haven't been so lucky, really. So it's just about his tenure more than the specifics, I guess.
Sure. We're interested in Woody and Buzz's relationship throughout the franchise and how it's changed. What do you guys see as the defining moments in their friendship throughout the full film?
Well, certainly in the first one, that moment, kind of a realization under the milk crate, you know, where I think Woody realizes that he has to face this. That's kind of the first crack in Woody, that he faces the reality of that he might not always be number one. I think that's an important thing between them.
That's an important one, and when Woody's facing kind of the question of his mortality in 2, and deciding that he's maybe going to step away from Andy and all that he's loved and known, and Buzz coming there and reminding him of who he is and reminding him of the value of him loving a child and being loved by Andy. That was a significant one for the two of them.
Right, and then kind of in this film, they've gotten this professional shorthand where they can almost communicate without speaking at this point. Like, they trust each other pretty deeply. So we'd like to think we've shown a pretty good progression of those two guys, you know.
Toy Story 3, the grabbing hands in the furnace, that's powerful.
How would you see their friendship developing, or their relationship developing beyond Toy Story 4?
I don't know. I sort of have in my head. I mean, I think that it's one of those things like in life when you have really great friends, but you know, certain things. There are seasons in life where you don't always you move, or you have different jobs and things change. I think, but you still hold on to those friends. Are still important to you. I mean, I have friends of mine that I haven't seen since the 8th grade, but if I saw them right now, we would go right back to it. I think that's how Buzz and Woody are, you know.
So we meet some new toys in this film, of course, and I'm sure you had lots of conversations about what toys to include. Were there ever any conversations around including some other licensed characters, such as the mouse I have?
Mickey Mouse?
You know, I don't know if we ever talked about Mickey, but yeah, we were constantly in conversation about what new characters to include. Every Toy Story film has kind of introduced some new characters as we've gone along the way, and at the end of the day, it's really about what's going to support the core of the story, you know, and for this it's Woody and his journey. And so I think Duke Kaboom and Gabby Gabby and Giggle McDimples, Ducky and Bunny, all of them are kind of, they're all in service of Woody's story and his progression as he goes along in this movie. And if they don't serve that purpose, they may have not made it into the film.
I mean, I'm sure you talked a lot about what characters to include in this. Were there ever any plans to include Lotso or any of the Sunnyside toys in 4?
We always wanted to make it feel like an adventure that's not just repeating anything before it. So Lotso was never in there. I love Gabby Gabby. I think that she's a new type of toy that we've never experienced before in Toy Story. So it was much more rewarding to go down that path and discover new toys than to try and redo something.